Hi, this is Gil Robles again, and I'm back again. I know I keep saying that, and it probably sounds like a broken record right now, but to be honest, things happened. Mostly, dealing with family situations, and I do work a 9 to 5, as well as do illustration work, and which also happened, which is a good thing. I wish it would happen more often, and that's why I haven't been posting as regularly as I should be. But I am really, really going to try to adhere to a schedule and get back to this. Right now, I am approaching a self portrait in a different way than I usually do. I mean, I've done this before, but one of the challenges that I've had with digital painting is that I find that when I work with the colors, that they tend to be so high key. I want to find a method of toning the colors down. And so in traditional art, there's this grisaille, I believe that's how it's pronounced, grisaille method, where you paint either in you do an underpainting in grays, or you choose your values, and from there, or you can do it like in a monochrome image in burnt umber or something like that to give it a more warmer tone. And you begin, after you worked out all your values, you begin to glaze your colors on top of that. And in that way, you control your values, you control your grays, and each color has a certain percentage of gray, and it's called value, not tone. And in tone, it's called tone in photography, and in painting, it's called values. And so I'm attempting to do something similar here. What I did was that I selected a few grays. I selected 5 of them, and I've made a palette over to the right of me, where I just want to stick to these grays with maybe a little bit modification, but just generally in this area, and to simplify the that way, to simplify the values and keep it within these with this family of values right here, keep it within that closeness, and in that way I build up my drawing, controlling my values, in an attempt not to have the colors, when I go over it with color, be so high key. Like I said, I didn't come up with this method, and I did something similar before, but this is just this is just me playing around. It's not an assignment; it's something I do for myself. And when you do these things for yourself, it's a good opportunity to think about your approaches, to think about your weaknesses, to think about the things that are a challenge to you. And every time I sit down to paint and draw, especially when I'm doing something for myself, I think about the things that I need to work on. I think about my weaknesses in my drawings and my weaknesses in my painting, and right now I'm trying to address the problem I have with digital color and it being so high key. At the same time, I do address other areas when it comes to drawing. It's always a challenge for me to make sure that when I draw the head, that the axis of the features, the axis of the head are right. Like the eye, I have a tendency to make one eye higher than the other, or to have the mouth on a different axis and it looks crooked. So I try to address those things every time, and be aware of your weaknesses when you approach your drawing or your painting, and in that way you can address those things. So anyway, that's what I am attempting to do. What I'm going to do later on, as I finish up these values, is that I'm going to also, when I bring in the color, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up another layer, of course, and then lower the transparency on that layer, and introduce color that way. And in that way, I start to build up the color and build up the richness of the color. Also, it gives me the opportunity to change. While I have the values pretty much set, what I do want to think about is color temperature. That is to say, the warms and the cool colors. And I'm starting to paint right now with, using reds, and so that's warm. But also, the more I go over to the gray area, like if you look at the color, you see from the top left is white, to the bottom left is black, and if you move to the side, you get closer to the pure color mixed in either with the white or the black or whatever percentage of grays in between. And that way, you have control not only of the color, but also the color. Like the red going into the grays can appear to be cooler as well when you use them, because it's mixed in a little. I think white tends to cool things, and or vice versa. I don't know, one of those things. But I just know when I put it down, it just doesn't seem as warm as when I go more towards the pure color. And I'll also go into some blues and stuff later on, and introduce them into the painting as I go on. But as you can see, in the gray areas look cooler. The gray area, the areas that are gray in the painting, you look at like to the left side of the face on the painting, you can see a little bit of gray, and that gray cools off the red, so it kind of helps, but and it kind of helps me not to let this painting jump in terms of the color. Now there's going to be times where it's going to call for I be a little bit bolder with the color, and but within that I want to keep it to I want to keep it in where I control these values. And I'm thinking about like I said, this is just an exercise for me to do, and I use self-portraits. I've done a lot of self-portraits over the years. Different artists, Rembrandt is famous for his self-portraits, and different artists use self-portraits, one to show off their skills to a potential client, and also to practice their skills. If you look at Rembrandt did more than painting self-portraits. What he did a number of etchings and so forth, in which he included himself or did a portrait of himself. And they're not always straight-on portraits. Sometimes there would be a portrait of an angry face, and it's a portrait of him. Or there would be a portrait in some fancy costume, and it's Rembrandt. And and in that way, he's in one way he's showing his skills at either showing emotion or developing different textures in the costumes and so forth. And this is a way of presenting yourself to clients as well, which is something that he did. And at the same time, some of his portraits were more, how would you say, more reflective, more of a where he thinks about himself, and he thinks about himself as an artist. And I don't know whether he meant to portray himself as an artist and show some kind of tragedy or whatever, or just as a human being. And what comes across is actually as a human being. He presents himself, and he kind of tells a story. It's kind of almost like a biography. If you really look at the paintings, and you look at him, and you look at how what it is that he painted. I remember I had a teacher in high school who would go to the Metropolitan Museum and look at the Rembrandt self-portrait, and he said it would be like having a conversation. And I know when I really appreciate a portrait in a museum, something that someone did, I always get the feeling that although time separates us from the person who did the actual painting, that something of that person's personality comes across, and you meet them. You meet them in some way, and because I mean, they're masters not just at depicting reality, but at depicting a human being. You know, at least I don't know how best I can say it, but Rembrandt definitely had that gift, that quality in his work. There are other painters like Velasquez. When you look at his paintings of the king, and even though they were how would you say, he flattered him. There was one painting where he did a painting of the king of Spain where it was not so flattering, and it was lost for a time, and they discovered it in one of his early portraits of the king, where he actually painted over that painting, and the X-ray presented a less handsome face, a man with a huge jaw, and just different than the portraits that we were accustomed to seeing. And it was more of an honest portrait of the king, but it was also more human. But even the later ones, even though he flattered the king, it still did not lack that human quality that it came through. I don't know if I can do any justice at explaining it, but it has a personality. It has a personality that comes through, and that's part of what I want to do. In technical issues aside, is when I paint a face, I want it to be so that it's more than just a technical drawing of a face. It's more than just anatomy or getting things getting things right, getting things in the right proportion and lining everything right and so forth. Even though all those things are in fact important and remain important, one of the other things after you accomplish all of that is it when they look at your painting, when they look at your portrait, does the audience encounter a personality? Does it go beyond just the likeness? I've heard people say that, you know what, there are many paintings that have captured the likeness of the model or the sitter or whatever, but those aren't always the ones that hang up in the museums, or those are not always the ones that we remember the most. I mean, what comes across is that is the personality of the sitter, and those tend to stay with us longer because we feel that we're meeting someone, that we can see some semblance of character that comes across the painting. Well, anyway, that is one of the things that I try to do. And again, as I mentioned before, one of the things I wanted to introduce was some more cooler colors, which I'm working into right now, using a blue instead of red, and you know what? It's funny. I'm doing the audio recording afterwards, but I'm looking at this as I'm talking, and I'm noticing that I did not use another layer, the layer on top of this where I reduced the opacity. I just painted right on top of things in the normal opacity. This is fine. But just as an aside, I am using the Pastel brush in Rebelle. This is Rebelle, by the way. It's a great software made by Escape Motions. It has excellent brushes. There's a limit to the brushes that you have, but all of these brushes, what they do have is they successfully mimic their real world counterparts, like the watercolor brush. If you look at some of my videos before, if you go to my channel, you'll see a video where I've demonstrated the Rebelle watercolor brush, and it has drips. It runs, and one color melds into the other. At the same time, you can dry. There's a button where you can dry your canvas, all right, your digital canvas, so that it will stop spreading or dripping or whatever. You can control the tilt of the canvas so that it can drip or spread in whatever direction you want. It just mimics watercolor real well as the acrylic brush. It can be like you can do like thick and pastels, and it looks really rich and so forth. And this, of course, is the pastel brush that I'm using. I haven't used it much. I'm really trying it out now. It's terrific. I like it. You need to play with these. I need to play with these things more to find out the full potential of each brush. But you can use each brush and make adjustments. You can either with the watercolor or an acrylic, you can add more water, and so it'll look thinner. It won't, in the acrylics, it won't have that as much impasto. Or you can subtract the water, and it has a great deal of impasto or paint buildup. And one of the other things I'm using, if you see like under the brushes where it's highlighted in blue, there's a little hand. It's of course the smudge tool, and I use that to I use that not just to smoothen transitions between one value to another, but also to kind of draw with, to stretch some of the drawing and so forth. Well, I'm coming to the end of this. It is I'm not sure if I accomplished what I wanted. Yeah, I did. But I have so much more to learn and to experiment with when it comes to digital art, and I'm really just starting to get used to the idea of doing digital art, coming from a traditional background. But there you have it. Please, if you enjoyed this video, subscribe to my channel. I will promise I will be back with more videos of different things that I have done. I've already done the artwork. I just need to edit it, and that takes time. There it is. That's the final. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.